So in my last video, we took a look at the vehicles for Mario Kart Wii, and like I said there, I will now take a look at the vehicles for Mario Kart 7, which in my opinion is the most unique game in the series. Unlike the rest of the games in the series, Mario Kart 7 doesn't really have any gimmicks that makes it unique, as it feels like a combination of Mario Kart DS, due to it being a portable game, as well as a beta for Mario Kart 8, as that game will improve on the many gimmicks of Mario Kart 7. However, with that being said, Mario Kart 7 would add a couple things that made it stand out at the time, with the main gimmick being the addition of gliders, as well as the ability to race underwater. Not only do these gimmicks change the layout of races, but it also has stats for air, sea, speed, and handling, which depending on the track, can affect what kart combo you choose. Speaking of which, the other addition Mario Kart 7 added was more variety in kart part selections. So not only could you choose what kart you want to race as, but you could also choose different tires and gliders as well, which will only help you balance or enhance the stats you want to use. With that being said, this video will probably be much shorter than the Wii kart rankings, since for one, there are only 17 karts in the game, and unlike in Wii, stats aren't too important in 7, so I won't go on about them as much. Also, bikes would make their return in Mario Kart 7 due to hardware limitations, as well as people complaining about bikes being overpowered in Mario Kart Wii, so the vehicle selection will be similar to Mario Kart DS. Anyway, with that being said, let's begin. For the worst kart in 7, as well as arguably the worst kart in the entire series, we have the buggy. The reason why I dislike the buggy is due to just how bare bones the design is, as it's literally just a frame of a kart. Not only is the design lazy, but it's also unoriginal, but we'll get more into that in a minute. To make matters worse, the buggy isn't even that good statistically, as it has the lowest stat total in the game. With other low-ranking karts on my previous list, like the Tyrant, there at least was something original, it usually had some good stats to make it bearable. But no, not only is the buggy just a bad vehicle altogether, but it's also a lazy and unoriginal design that should have never made out of development. You can literally replace the buggy with a blank space, and you won't be able to notice anything different. You got to be kidding me. The pipe frame is another bare bones kart design, as like its name implies, it's a pipe frame of a kart and is very similar to the buggy. However, unlike the buggy, the pipe frame at least has a history. You see, the pipe frame was the original default kart in Super Mario Kart and Mario Kart 64. It is one of the first retro karts in 7, which are basically karts that have appeared in previous games. Besides it being a throwback kart, it also has some pretty decent stats as well. While its base speed is pretty low, it's more than made up for by its high sea and airspeed, so with its history and stats, the pipe frame is essentially a better version of the buggy. That's of course not mentioning that it also has different color variants as well. So while I do appreciate the retro feel of the pipe frame, I really can't rank it any higher due to its bare bones design. But I will say it is one of the karts I do like racing with from time to time when I'm feeling nostalgic. Next up we have the standard kart. Since I've already talked about the standard kart in my DS and Wii rankings videos, I won't spend too much time on it here, since what I said there also applies here. It's the default kart that is average all around. However, I will compare 7's standard kart to DS's and Wii's versions. I do think Wii's standard is far superior, due to its recognizable bumper and more splash of color. But I do think it's an improvement from DS's standard kart, since 7's bumper is more raised and defined. Also, I think the right trim adds more detail to the kart as well. Anyway, not much more to say, so let's move on. Gold Standard is an interesting kart, as it's pretty much like the standard cart, but solid gold. Like its name implies, this cart is sorta like a trophy, as it's one of the last unlockables in the game, by either getting 10,000 VR online or collecting 20,000 coins. Funny enough, the gold standard is actually worse than the standard cart. As while it does have a high speed and rate stat, its other stats are either average or below average. They get even worse when you equip it with the gold tires and glider. Despite that though, I still think the gold standard is a cool concept, as it kinda acts like a trophy after you've mastered the game. I also think the name gold standard is pretty clever. So again, another okay cart, but I really wish we could get some more variety soon, as the last 4 entries feel very similar to each other. Finally, a cart that has something other than a default design. The Tiny Tug, like the name implies, is essentially a small tugboat. I really like how its large smokestack acts as the exhaust pipe, and the seat also looks pretty nice as well. As you could probably have guessed, the Tiny Tug is the best water cart in the game, as it has the best sea speed and handling in the game, so this cart is best suited for underwater tracks. Its base stats, however, are kind of disappointing, as while the Tiny Tug does have decent rate and off-road stats, its base speed is the lowest in the game, which leads to my point where I think the Tiny Tug is one of the more awkward carts in the series. I mean, boats are primarily used for floating on water and not really racing on a track. Also, while there are some boats that are known for racing, a large tugboat isn't one of them. This is the only cart in Mario Kart 7 that wasn't brought back for tour, and I can kinda see why that is. While the Tiny Tug is unique and sticks out, it does kinda seem like a very odd concept for a cart compared to others in the series. The Zucchini is essentially the sequel to the Cucumber from Mario Kart DS, as well as being very similar to the classic dragster from Mario Kart Wii, which are all based off of a 1930s sprint car, with the Zucchini in particular being based off the Lotus 43. Design-wise, the Zucchini makes some noticeable changes from the Cucumber, with the most noteworthy being the Zucchini's more flatter design, as well as the yellow stripe near the top, which I honestly think is an improvement, since it makes the cart more sleek and sporty in my opinion. The Zucchini is also different statistically from the Cucumber, as the Zucchini has an above average speed stat, but below average C speed and mini turbo, whereas the Cucumber has high acceleration and handling stats. Overall, the Zucchini is an okay cart that made some significant improvements from its predecessor, from having a more sleeker and sporty design to having better stats that makes it more competitive and viable. As you could probably tell from its name and design, the Birthday Girl is a cart that is targeted towards female racers/players. I mean, the design is very girly in my opinion, as a shoe with lace and a polka dot ribbon seems really cliche in my opinion. Stat-wise, the Birthday Girl is a very beginner-friendly cart, as well as has the lowest base speed in the game. It also has the highest handling and acceleration stats in the game, while also having a high air and sea speed, so it's a cart you can still perform well on, but also helps you get used to the controls. With all of that being said though, I kind of don't like how this cart is targeted at a specific gender. It just kind of feels cheap and inauthentic to me, and I do think you could make a female friendly cart without being so on the nose. I do like how there are different designs of the cart though, as it's the only cart in the game, besides the standard cart and pipe frame, to have different color variations. Besides the default pink, there's orange, blue, and purple colors, which are for Daisy, Rosalina, and Queen Bee respectively. While I do like that the cart has a fun and unique design, as well as having 4 different color combinations, they're all pretty good. I kind of dislike the inauthentic feeling this cart gives off with its name, and I feel like it could have been higher if a few changes were made, but still, an okay kart overall. The Egg 1 is another retro kart, and one I've already talked about in my DS video. Design-wise, the Egg 1 hasn't really changed much from its DS design, as they both still have a round shape, and it still looks like a Yoshi egg. Stat-wise, there isn't too much to note in differences between the DS and 7 version. They both still have a high acceleration stat, with the Egg 1 being tied with the Birthday Girl for the highest in the game. However, its speed and drift stat kind of did trade places between DS and 7. The Egg 1 also has a high air and sea speed, with it actually being tied with the Tiny Tug for the highest sea speed in the game. In my original DS rankings video, I placed the Egg 1 in the middle of the list, and it's still the same here. Like I said in that video, I think this kart is a good representation for Yoshi, and it also has some pretty decent and fun stats. Again, it's a pretty good kart overall. The Soda Jet is a fun and cute looking kart, as it resembles a small toy jet. I know that I complained about the Hurricane having a plain design in my DS rankings video, but I think the Soda Jet fits way better due to its smaller design and toy-like look. Speaking of which, I also really like the light green and blue of the kart mixed with the yellow, as I think it's a pretty cool color combination. I also like how the Soda Jet is the only kart in the game that has a jet sound for its engine, which I think is a cool and unique detail. Stat-wise, the Soda Jet is essentially the opposite of the Tiny Tug. While the Tiny Tug is heavy and slow, the Soda Jet is light and fast. The Soda Jet also has the best air stats in the game, while the Tiny Tug has the best sea stats, which makes sense considering their designs. So yeah, the Soda Jet is just a really nice and unique kart in the series, as it has a pretty good color combo, as well as some fun stats that makes it enjoyable to race with. The Bruiser is easily the most intimidating kart in 7. I really like the colors of this kart, as the black body, along with the red seat and gold trim, kinda reminds me of a coffin for some reason. It gives me an eerie feeling. That's of course not mentioning the spikes on the kart, as well as the evil look of the headlights and the kart's snarling smile that reminds me of a piano from Super Mario 64, which makes it that much more intimidating. Somehow, the Bruiser is also based on a 1930s roadster, which is an interesting fact. Stat-wise, the Bruiser is both heavy and fast, as it's one of the fastest karts in the game, and can easily drive by and plow over other racers. However, the Bruiser also has low acceleration and handling stats, with low speed and the air and sea as well, so it's kinda average all around. Overall, the Bruiser is a very intimidating and badass looking kart, and while it does have some hindrances in the air and sea, on any land track it can easily dominate due to its high speed and ability to bump around and intimidate other racers. The Cactex is a kart that is based on a cactus, which you can probably tell by its look and name alone. Speaking of which, I think the name Cactex is a really cool and fitting name for this kart. I also think the design is pretty solid as well, since the golden green color combo goes pretty well together. I also like how the golden spikes give the kart a very intimidating look, while also having a cool and unique design as well. Stat-wise, the Cactex is generally a slow kart, having low speed, acceleration, and many turbo stats. However, it performs well on tracks with a lot of off-road, due to its above average off-road stat. It also has a surprisingly high sea speed as well, which is definitely an interesting stat spread. There's not a lot more to say about the Cactex, but it does have a very unique and intimidating design, as well as an unusual stat distribution that makes it one of the more unique karts in the series. The B-Dasher is another retro kart, as it was the signature kart in Mario Kart DS. Look-wise, the B-Dasher still looks the same as its DS counterpart, as both are round and sleek with a white body and a red stripe near the top. Stat-wise, however, both variants of the B-Dasher differ significantly. The DS variant has a high acceleration and rate stat, while the 7 variant will essentially trade its acceleration stat for a high speed stat. In fact, the B-Dasher is one of the fastest karts in 7. However, with that being said, the B-Dasher also has one of the lowest acceleration stats in 7, as well as having a low C speed as well, so it kinda balances the kart out from its high base speed. In my DS video, I ranked the B-Dasher as number 6, and it has the same ranking here. While the B-Dasher doesn't have the same significance as it did in DS, it still has a really sleek and solid design. It is probably the third most recognizable kart in the series, behind only the standard kart and pipe frame. The Barrel Train is the last retro kart on this list, as it first appeared in Mario Kart Double Dash. Out of all the retro karts that I've talked about, the Barrel Train probably had the most drastic change from its predecessor, since the green platform and the 2 back wheels were removed in 7, which makes sense considering they were used as the second racer in Double Dash, and as of this video, that feature has never returned to the series. Speaking of design, the Barrel Train is another kart that has a really unique design, as it's based on a steam engine, which I think is a really cool idea. I also like the steam coming out of the train's smokestack, as well as the barrel being a nice reference to the Donkey Kong Country series. Stat-wise, the Barrel Train in 7 is similar to its counterpart from Double Dash, as they both have above average speed and rate stats. However, the Barrel Train also has the lowest C speed and handling in the game, but it also has the highest mini-turbo as well, so it averages out at the end. Before this video, I always thought that the Barrel Train was a unique kart in 7, due to the recent release of Donkey Kong Country Returns, as well as the Donkey Kong Country track on 7. However, with it being a retro kart, it just goes to show just how cool and unique the Barrel Train is, as well as being a great representation of the Donkey Kong series. As you could have probably guessed from the name alone, the Bumble V is a kart based off of a bumblebee. To be more specific, it's based off the Sting Bee enemy from Super Mario 3D Land. Design-wise, the Bumble V has a really sleek and sporty look, due to its flat design and black and yellow color combo, which just goes really well together. The Bumble V also has a stinger in the front, similar to the Cactex, and it gives the kart an intimidation factor as well. Stat-wise, the Bumble V has the highest acceleration in the game, with an average speed stat to go with it. It also has the lowest handling stats as well. It also has a very high mini-turbo and airspeed stat. With that being said, the Bumble V is above average overall. Not much more to say, the Bumble V is just a really cool idea and execution for a kart in general. To its clever name, to its sporty but also playful and intimidating design, it just makes for a really cool and fun kart overall. Finally, the Koopa Clown Kart is an option in a Mario Kart game. If you saw my DS rankings video, I complained about how the Hurricane tried too much, as it added rings and a propeller to the kart. Here, however, that mistake is avoided, as the Koopa Clown has the same iconic appearance as it has had throughout the multiple Mario games in the series, with its white round bowl shape and green rim, to its black eyes and orange lips. Stat-wise, the Koopa Clown is one of the few karts that has very little negative stats, as besides its acceleration and off-road stats, the rest of the Koopa Clown stats are average for the most part, but it does have the highest handling and mini-turbo in the game, so that's definitely a major plus. There's not much more to say, since if you're familiar with the Mario series, you should already know how iconic the Koopa Clown car is. and I'm glad that it also has some pretty respectable stats as well. So overall, just a really cool and iconic kart. Out of all the karts in Mario Kart 7, the Blue 7 is easily the sleekest and most sporty kart in the game. I really like the blue color with the white stripe down the middle, as it gives the kart a very race car look, which is only enhanced with the yellow ring on the back and number 7 sticker. Speaking of appearances, the Blue 7 is a mix between the Streamliner's color combo from Mario Kart DS and the Honey Coop's design from Mario Kart Wii. In fact, the Blue 7 is actually based on the Chaparral 2E, which I think is an interesting detail. Stat-wise, the Blue 7 is the fastest kart in the game, which you could probably guess from its design. However, it also has the lowest acceleration in the game, as well as a low mini-turbo stat. But as long as you avoid being hit much, it should be a pretty decent kart overall. In conclusion, the Blue 7 is just a really sleek and sporty vehicle that looks like a race car and has the stats to back it up. While the Blue 7 is a great kart in its own right, there's just one that I like a little bit better. Even before I made this list, I knew that the Cloud9 was my favorite kart in Mario Kart 7. Not only is the name Cloud9 easily the best name for any vehicle in the Mario Kart series, but the concept is also cool, as it's based off Lakitu's Cloud in the Mario series. Stat-wise, the Cloud9 is another vehicle that has very little negative stats. While it does have a low speed and rate stat, its other stats are either average or above average. In fact, the Cloud9 actually has the highest handling stat in the game. The Cloud9 also has high sea and air speeds, as well as a high mini-turbo, which more than makes up for it being the slowest base speed kart in the game, and makes it an above average kart overall. Some people might argue that the Cloud9 is a simple kart design-wise, as it's basically a fluffy white cloud with black eyes and a smile. While that may be true, I think the ideal and execution outweighs its simple design, as the thought of riding and floating on a cloud is just a really cool and euphoric feeling. So in conclusion, I think Cloud9 is a very simple kart that has an amazing design and name, as well as pretty good stats to back it up. Plus with its iconic connection to the Mario series, it would be a kart I'd love to see return in the near future. So we have finally reached the end of the video. To be honest, this list was kind of a mixed bag, as while the top half of the list was pretty solid, the bottom half only had karts that were okay at best, and mediocre at worst. At least in my other two kart ranking videos, there were lower ranked karts that I thought were actually pretty good, but at 7, it wasn't until I got to the Soda Jet that vehicles started to pick up in quality. Even then, there wasn't any vehicle that I would personally think needs to return in a future Mario Kart game, with the only exception of course being the Cloud9, but I could name several karts that I would love to see return from DS and Wii. So overall, this list was kind of disappointing. It felt like it took a step back in the direction Wii and DS were going in, but at least there were a few positives I like talking about, with the most noteworthy being the air and sea stats, and how it changed the dynamic of racing in the series. Anyway, my next video will be ranking each vehicle from Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and with more variety in vehicles and racing mechanics, maybe it'll improve on the shortcomings of 7. Before I end this video, I also want to thank everyone who watched until the end. And if you're new to this series, and the channel in general, I would really appreciate it if you could consider giving this video a like, as well as checking out my other content and subscribing to the channel. Anyway, that's pretty much all I had to say, so until next time, Koopa out.